Chapter 61. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 61. My CEO fiancé. While I was looking around, Brandon headed straight my way. I felt the intensity of his presence even before I saw him standing in front of me. The moment of our dreaded reunion was now upon me, and it took a lot of effort to smile pleasantly at him. If I thought that our passionate one-night stand from earlier bothered him or changed anything between us, I was sorely wrong. Brandon looked at my face wordlessly before his eyes traveled down my body all the way down to my feet and then up again. It was clear that he was appraising me and not for my looks or sex appeal. After a moment of silence, he nodded as if quite satisfied with what he was seeing. I let out a breath of relief that made me realize how nervous I had been until just now. You look passable. I'll get more clothes tailored for you. I'll cover the expenses, don't worry, Brandon said emotionlessly. Okay. I mumbled softly. Come this way, Brandon said as he offered me a hand. My eyes widened at his unexpected gesture. He wants me to hold his hand. Here in his office. Really? My questioning and slightly shocked expression must have been clear to him because Brandon quickly closed the distance between us so that his next words would be for my ears only. You're my fiancé. We're supposed to be madly in love everywhere that we go, including this office, he reminded me in a whisper. Right. I whispered in reply as I nodded my head. Let's try that again, Brandon said calmly. He took a step away from me and offered me his hand. I've held his hand before more times than I could even begin to count, but it still made me feel uncomfortable to do it now. Slowly, I placed my hand into his and immediately his hand held mine firmly. I'm happy that you could make it today, Brandon said with a charming smile. His gray eyes smiled at me cunningly and I knew that the days ahead would be littered with thorns and nails. Not quite knowing what to say, I chose to offer him a sweet and bright smile that I had in stock. Come along. I'll take you to my office and then we'll be having a very important meeting, Brandon said like it was nothing as he pulled me along with him. I tried to keep up with him in my heels. Brandon must have realized my struggle because he slowed his pace to match mine so that I could walk comfortably at his side. The way he dressed hasn't changed at all. His clothes were pretty much the same as the ones that he liked to wear before, and it had become his signature look whenever he appeared in public or he was covered in the media. Blue suit, black shirt or turtleneck sweater and matching black pants. Brandon led me up what seemed to be a private elevator that led straight up to his floor. He hadn't said a word since leaving the lobby. My mind continued to reminiscent on the time in the past when I used to compliment him on how his outfit really complemented the color of his eyes. It hasn't been that long ago, but it felt like it was a lifetime away. What are you daydreaming about? Brandon asked and I felt his eyes on me. Oh. Nothing. Sorry, I replied. I see. Please focus on your job, my lady, he said sternly just when the elevator came to a stop. The door automatically opened when we arrived at our designated floor. Brandon gestured for me to step out first and I had to say that his gentlemanly action caught me a little off guard. His floor was decorated in line with the lobby downstairs. This is my floor. My personal office is here along with various meeting and conference rooms. There's also a gym and a bedroom in case I need to stay over, Brandon explained. I was amazed at how big and spacious the place was. Wasn't it a little over the top to have an entire floor to himself? I guess when you're the CEO and the owner of the company, you could do anything that you wanted. It was hard to imagine that this company was started out of the apartment room that we used to share back in college. I bit my lower lip and winced at the memory that crossed my mind. Before my mind would drag me further down memory lane, I crushed that thought. Whatever we had is over now. The Brandon that I see right now isn't the same man from back then and the Elena that I am right now, isn't the same girl from back then either. Are you, okay? Brandon asked and I could sense a hint of concern in his voice. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? I asked with a teasing smile as I tried to cover up how disturbed I had felt just now. Good. Come this way, we need to talk a little before we start the day, Brandon instructed as he led the way. He brought me to a large room that was his personal office. The most amazing thing about the room was the unobstructed view of the city and the sky that could be seen from this high floor. I knew that money could buy many things, but one of the most impressive of those things was a view just like this. "Wow, this view is something," I complimented openly. I headed to stand right in front of the glass that separated me from the air outside. A long wall of glass showcased the view outside perfectly. If it looked so breathtakingly beautiful in the day, I wondered what it would look like at night with all the lights on contrasting against the dark of night. Apart from the view, his office had the standard composition of a CEO's office. A large and long table to host private meetings. A gray leather sofa set with a coffee table in the middle. His large work desk and matching chair. Brandon's office was sparkling clean and lacked any signs of him. To be continued. Chapter 62. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 62. First challenge. There was nothing there apart from a sign bearing his name on his table that would tell the tale that Brandon was the owner of this room. This did not quite match with the memory that I had of him, but then I knew best that people could change. "Sit down," Brandon commanded as he sat down on one of the sofas. I took the seat opposite him and knew that serious business starts now. Brandon looked at me with his gray eyes before he sighed while I waited for him to speak. "The board of directors and some representative of the shareholders will be here later today in the afternoon," he said. "Don't worry, I'll just wait here or something," I quickly said reassuringly. "That's not it. They're here with the sole purpose of seeing you," Brandon quickly corrected. "To see me?" I asked incredulously. Why would important people like that want to see me? I had nothing to do with Renix. Right. More precisely, they're here to see my fiancée to make sure that she really exists. It's so stupid, really," Brandon said with a bored expression on his face. If I recalled correctly, Brandon wanted me to act as his fiancée to please his family so that they could leave him and his love life alone. Marriage is required for him to take over his father's chain of hotels and casinos. That doesn't quite explain the meeting later today, though. Sorry, I don't quite follow. I thought that I only needed to act as your fiancé in front of your parents," I said with slight confusion. "That's right. If I have a fiancé, my parents will stop introducing me to worthless women with the hope that we'll get married, and I can focus more on my work. There are many things that I need to work on and I don't have the time or effort to date anyone. Marriage is the furthest thing from my mind right now," Brandon stated, sounding very bored and sick of it all. "Aha!" I murmured. "However, for both my father's company and my own, the board of directors and some shareholders are demanding for me to settle down for the long-term stability of the business. It doesn't make any sense, but that's the hand that I've been dealt," Brandon said passively. "Okay, then, for today's meeting," I said as I started to get the direction that this was heading. "Correct. I'll introduce you to everyone as my girlfriend who I plan to get engaged with as soon as possible with their approval," Brandon concluded. "Wait, then that means..." "You're a smart girl, Elena. The key word is, with their approval. This is your first challenge. Can you get the board of directors' approval to be my fiancée in today's meeting, please?" Brandon said with a mocking grin. "Ha! When I first took on this case, I knew that it would be massively difficult because it's Brandon that I'm dealing with, but this is just... How am I supposed to convince the board of directors? Aren't they all super senior and experienced? They also held high position in society and the meeting is already this afternoon. I was right to charge you 20 times the usual rate," I muttered underneath my breath without thinking. "What did you say?" Brandon asked, followed by a soft laugh that told me that he heard all that I had said just now. "This is crazy. Why didn't you tell me this before?" I turned to snap at him in my panic. To my extreme anguish, Brandon just laughed as I continued to panic in the face of such a grim situation. "Why are you just sitting there laughing? Have you gone mad? I snapped. You're just very funny when you're all bothered and flustered, Brandon replied while still laughing a little. I don't want to hear that from you right now. How can you drop a bomb like that on me? I cried out in frustration. Obviously because I'm paying you an exorbitant amount for you to deal with it for me, Brandon replied unfazed. Breathe, Elena, breathe. How do I convince them? What do I have to do? I asked in rapid succession. To be honest, I'm not sure. But I was sure that you could figure something out, Brandon replied like it wasn't his problem. I looked at him as I was stunned into silence. My mouth dropped open and I must have looked very dumb right at that moment. This is ridiculous. Tell me, what do they have in mind? What do they expect to see? I inquired again. I don't know. Maybe something that will convince them that we're truly in love and serious about relationship. Brandon threw in a few guesses. My eyes narrowed at his suspiciously. Honestly, how am I supposed to show that in a meeting? Despite my anxiety and high level of stress, Brandon seemed relaxed and at ease as he lounged on the leather sofa. I placed my fingers in between my brows and stretched them apart to keep myself from frowning. Botox is expensive. What happens if they don't believe us? I asked. I'll probably have to find another way to convince them, Brandon said as if in thought. And the contract? I asked further. Void. It'll be voided immediately if you fail, Brandon stated. I knew it. If I don't succeed, I'm going to have to kiss this job goodbye along with all the money that came with it. Why didn't I ask for 100 times the usual rate? You're really just taking advantage of me, aren't you? I muttered bitterly. What are you talking about? You asked for 20 times the usual rate and I agreed. Completely fair and square, Brandon replied with a chuckle. I hated to admit it, but he did have a point. Now, how should I deal with this mess? How much time do I have till the meeting? I asked. 2 hours and 42 minutes, precisely, Brandon said as he glanced down at his watch. Shit. I muttered softly. Suddenly the sofa shifted underneath me, and I looked up to realize that Brandon had planted himself next to me. To be continued. Chapter 63. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 63. Truth in every lie. You're back to normal now, Elena. You were so uptight before that I like you much better like this, Brandon said as he casually placed his large hand on my back. He smiled at me cheerfully and in that instant, I saw him as the young man that I met during the start of my university life. I closed my eyes and pushed that image away from my mind as my hand grabbed his wrist and yanked his arm away from me. Don't touch me so casually, I snapped at him coldly. What? The scary Elena is back, Brandon teased before laughing at me. Brandon. The sight of him laughing carefreely very close to me on the sofa made me have second thoughts about him changing. Now that I think about it, we used to bicker and have little quarrels like this all the time while we were dating. Brandon would always find something to frustrate me just so that he could laugh when I panicked or got flustered. Those days were fun, however, that doesn't help solve the problem right in front of me right now. Maybe. Just maybe, Brandon hasn't changed much from our time together. Not that it mattered. Time is ticking by. I need to get my act together if I'm going to successfully fool all those people. Do you have a laptop that I can borrow by any chance? I asked. Sure do, but what do you need it for? He asked. I'm going to research my enemies. I replied without hesitation. Everyone on the board of directors are prominent members of society. If I can get a sense of what each person is like, what they believe in, their public stance and any other random information about them, then maybe I can figure out what they're looking to see. Surely, you're not feeling nervous, right? You're supposed to be a pro at this, Miss Contract Wife, Brandon teased me. Even though we were standing right outside the door to the meeting room where the board members are waiting for us, Brandon still had the galls to tease me. I wanted to whack him so badly. Brandon, I called his name softly as I stood close to his side. Yes, he replied, and I could feel his eyes on my face. Are you ready to be my fiancé? If you want to change your mind, now's the last chance that you have. After this meeting is over, you'll be stuck with me until this shameless charade is over, I said confidently before flashing him one of my more radiant smiles. Wow, that someone's confident, he murmured. Failure isn't an option that when you're drowning in debt, I said before winking at him teasingly. I don't know what trick you've got up your sleeve, but good luck. I hope it works. For both of our sakes, Brandon said as he grinned over at me. I placed my hands in the crook of Brandon's arm and nodded at him, signaling that I was ready. With a firm nod my way, Brandon pushed open the large double door. I knew that once we entered through this door, the official start of our fake relationship and everything that came along with it was what awaited us. We stepped through the door together into a very large meeting room and I felt all pairs of eyes on us immediately. No one said anything and the silence felt deafening. I smiled a little as I clung to Brandon's arm. It was a good mix of acting and my natural nervousness. Hopefully, the spectators found it a convincing act. Brandon, it's good that you're able to make it, an old man said as he stood up from his seat. Of course. It's not often that the entire board of directors would convene like this. It's an honor to meet everyone again, Brandon said before smiling politely. I could feel everyone's eyes on me and wondered when I would be introduced and when I had to start performing my convincing act of being the love of Brandon's life. I assume that the lady standing next to you is, the old man continued in a kind voice. Yes. Sorry for the late introduction and the unease that I may have caused. This is Elena, the woman I have been dating with the intent of getting married to in the near future, Brandon said confidently. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Elena, I'm Brandon's girlfriend, I introduced myself politely. Although everyone should have been aware that Brandon would be bringing his girlfriend along to the meeting, for some reason, they seemed quite stunned to see me. Perhaps they didn't truly believe that Brandon had a girlfriend at first or that he was willing to introduce his girlfriend to them. Miss Elena, if you don't mind, can you tell us more about yourself? Perhaps, your background and how your relationship with Mr. Brandon started, an old woman with gray hair asked from her seat at the long meeting table. Of course. I replied in my flawlessly sweet voice. I began introducing myself and my background, covering where I went for school and university before starting to tell them how my relationship with Brandon started. The way everyone focused their attention on me when I was about to start the tale of our love, made me aware that the thing that they cared most about was whether my relationship with Brandon was real or not. If someone were to ask me how to tell a convincing lie, I would tell them that the best lies always have the truth laced in it. Although Brandon and I have rekindled our relationship just recently, our romantic relationship started many years back when we were both studying at university. As you may have realized from my introduction just now, Brandon and I went to the same university, and we studied the same major, which was business. Brandon is 2 years older than me and we met when I was a freshman and he was in his 3rd year of university. I said quite truthfully. To be continued. Chapter 64. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 64. It started when our eyes met my university days. The first day of university that I had worked so hard for was a gloomy day with dark clouds. That didn't make me look forward to my time at university any less than I initially did. After getting accepted into the business school of one of the leading universities in the country, it was an added bonus that one of my friends from high school also made it. It wasn't exactly a surprise that she also made it because we had studied hard together in order to make it. I had to say that I was pleasantly surprised that another girl from my class was aiming to major in business in university like I did. Perhaps it was common for girls in other schools, but the girls in my school usually took the marriage route or attending major in the arts. Her name is Francia, and she had been attending the same high school as me. However, we did not get close to each other until we found out that we shared the same goal for university. Although I would like to say that Francia was truly unlike the other girls from school who were crazy about men, that wasn't exactly the case. The truth was that Francia had been dating an older guy for a while now with the approval and joy of her parents. If I wasn't wrong, her boyfriend was 2 years older and had started university by the time that they started dating. I heard that you also want to study business at university. Is that true? I asked excitedly. Yeah, did the teacher tell you about it? Francia asked shyly. Francia smiled shyly at me as her light brown eyes twinkled. Her long fingers started twirling a lock of wavy brown hair as she looked at me. Yes. The thing is, I share the same goal as you. Let's do our best and get into university together, I said enthusiastically. Really? That's awesome. Let's study together and let's both get in. It feels better knowing someone else is sharing the same aim as me. Most girls are going into art. Francia said with relief. I know. Why do you want to get into this program? I asked curiously. The truth is that my boyfriend is studying there now. So, I want to be with him. Maybe we'll get married after he graduates from university, Francia admitted shyly. There wasn't anything wrong with that, but I had to say that I felt slightly disappointed. I thought that she would be vastly different from the other girls from our school, but that didn't turn out to be the case. Good luck. All the more reason to study hard, I replied before flashing her an encouraging smile. Finally, the first day of university arrived and along with it came the entrance ceremony. The campus was much larger than our school and there were many people here today. I had arranged to meet up with Francia so that we could go through the administrative process of the first day together. There were no classes on the first day and so the day ended quite early. Are you free after this? Francia asked. I guess. Why? I replied casually. I'm meeting my boyfriend after this, and I wanted to introduce him to you. Francia said a little proudly. Oh, right. I haven't met him although I've heard so much about him, I said, feigning interest. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk about him all the time, Francia said with a laugh. Let's just say that it isn't uncommon for girls to show off their boyfriends. I kept a smile on as I pretended that I was interested. That's not what I meant. I'm fine with tagging along, but are you sure that I won't be getting in the way of your date? I asked, hoping that she might offer me an excuse to avoid the trip. It's not really a date. Let's go. We can eat out at a nice place too, Francia said before tugging on my arm. I'm dead if you say so. I mumbled. We arrived at the restaurant that was located not far from university. Probably because of the high price, the restaurant was almost empty, and it wasn't hard to spot one of the very few tables that were occupied. A man with short blonde hair waved in our direction before calling Francia's name. That must be Francia's boyfriend, Philip. Francia literally dragged me by the hand as she hurried over to the table where her boyfriend was seated. I had to say that Philip seemed like a decent guy, and he seemed very sociable. My evaluation of him was confirmed when he started introducing himself to me smoothly. Francia took her seat opposite her boyfriend while I took the seat next to her at the four-person table. When I sat down, that was when I realized that there was a man in the seat opposite me. Was there a man sitting next to Philip all this time? Philip was still chatting loudly to me and Francia, but I couldn't hear what he was saying at all. My eyes and mind were focused on the man sitting opposite me. The man had ash blonde hair, a very fine complexion, very long eyelashes, and the hand that held the book that he was reading looked so refined like it had never known a day of hard work. Truthfully, I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. Despite the fact that Philip was chatting away and the fact that I had just sat down opposite him at the table, the man didn't even look up from the small notebook that he was reading. It was like he belonged in a parallel universe, and to him, we didn't exist. Oh, sorry. I forgot to introduce this guy here. Girls, this is my best friend, Brandon. Brandon, say hi to the girls. Philip introduced his friend. That was when I learnt that the man sitting opposite me was called Brandon. If Brandon heard Philip's voice, he chose to ignore it. To be continued. Chapter 65. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 65. Totally captivated. Francia looked nervously from me to Brandon and then to her boyfriend. It was apparent that she wasn't sure how to react in this situation. Brandon. Hey, Brandon, Philip hissed as he nudged his friend with his elbow. The man called Brandon let out a sigh before glancing up from the book that he was reading. At that moment, his eyes met mine and I sucked in a rapid breath at the beauty of his gray eyes. He smirked at me before closing his book and placing it down on the table in front of him. My name is Brandon. It is a pleasure to meet you girls, however, this guy here isn't my best friend, Brandon said almost monotonously. His cold reaction disturbed Francia and I could see her panicking. On the other hand, I found his attitude so refreshing and different from the other men that I've met before who would fawn all over me. When he looked at me just now, I felt like he really saw me for who I was. Please don't say that. We're good friends, right? Philip said almost pleadingly. Brandon glanced at his friend and then decided not to say anything. Philip turned to smile weakly at us. Brandon also studies business, so we all share the same major here. If you have any issues with your studies or anything, just ask this guy. He's super like out of this world smart, Philip announced proudly. Compared to this guy, anyone is smart. Brandon said coldly. Don't say things like that even if it's true. My girlfriend is sitting right there. Philip said, followed by a shy laugh. All this time, I had just been staring at this face. I was so captivated by him that nothing else seemed to matter anymore. For some reason, my mouth began moving as if it had a will of its own. My name is Elena. It's nice to meet you, Brandon. I said shyly but clearly. Let's get along, Elena, Brandon said as his gray eyes met and held mine again. For the first time in my teenager life, I was at a loss for words in front of a man. All I could do was nod my head in agreement with what he had said. I wouldn't lie and say that I fell in love with Brandon at first sight, but I believe that I was more than slightly attracted to his looks and the solemn and serious aura about him. What's for sure was that I had developed an unexplainable interest in him since the first time that I laid eyes on him. This man, who seemed like he came from a different universe, I wanted to know everything about him. Since the first time that I met him, I wanted to learn more about him and always be there to support him. Brandon, as you all probably know already, is a very smart, talented, and motivated man. When he aspires to do something, he would commit to it until the very end. That trait is something that he had back then and still possesses now, and it is what draws me to him. The more time we spent together during our university days, the more I wanted to support him in any way possible to make his dream come true. This company, where we are meeting now, is the result of his genius, hard work, and commitment, and I am so proud to have been part of his journey in getting here, I said as my voice rang out clear with passion. As I could see that everyone was still listening intently to what I was saying, I decided to go on after a short pause to collect my thoughts. Due to various circumstances in our personal lives, we decided to end our relationship shortly after Brandon graduated from university. From then on, we went our separate ways and my role in his life was reduced to nothing more than a faraway spectator. However, there was never a day when I didn't wish for his success. The height that this company has reached never surprised me, and I know that it will only reach further heights in the future. Honestly, it was a miracle to me that Brandon and I could renew our relationship, I said truthfully. I had always watched him from afar as his newly formed empire grew until it rivaled that of his parents. We were never in touch, and we didn't part on good terms. However, it was true that I always wished him the best of everything. It was also true that it was like a miracle for us to be reunited under this contract of a fake relationship. Your story is touching and all, but up until recently you were married to another man. Had he not passed away, you would probably still be married to him, right? A woman asked cynically. I smiled outwardly while I cursed the woman inwardly for her stupid question. Oh well, it wasn't like I honestly thought that a sweet love story could turn their cynical minds around. Maybe but maybe not. Honestly, I married George purely out of my desire to repay my parents for the love and kindness that they've shown me for all the years that they've raised me. It was all to fulfill my parents' request and dear wishes. Throughout the happiness, sadness, luxury or difficulties of my marriage to my ex-husband, my heart has and probably always will belong to Brandon alone, I said passionately as I placed my hand flat on my heart. So, you're saying that you married a man when you didn't love him at all? How can we trust that you are truly in love with Brandon and that you do not have other intentions? Another old woman asked as her brows furrowed at me. Be calm, isn't that what I've been saying just now? How many times do I have to repeat myself for your sake? That is correct. I will not lie and pretend that my first marriage was out of love because it simply wasn't. However, in our society, it isn't uncommon for people in our circles to engage in marriage of convenience. I am sure that you are aware of that as well. Just like I have told the complete truth about my first marriage, I assure you that everything else I have said is the truth, I replied smoothly. To be continued. Chapter 66. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. 66 Award-winning performance. Miss Elena, are you truly in love with Brandon? An old man with a white beard asked. No, but for the sake of repaying my debt. Yes. It's a little embarrassing to say it out loud, but that I am indeed very much in love with him. Unlike my first marriage, I hope with all my heart that my second marriage will be for love and no other reason, I said before smiling humbly and then bowing my head slightly. Glancing up, I could tell that the board members seemed satisfied with my response. Various of them nodded. Even if they didn't like my story, I was sure that they at least believed that Brandon and I are dating right now. I guess that's more than enough interrogation for my beautiful girlfriend for the day. I wouldn't want to put a frown on her pretty face, Brandon cut in as he could sense that the audience seemed to have had their fill. Suddenly, Brandon wrapped his arms around my waist and began hugging me from behind to the surprise of everyone in the room. I turned my head back a little to ask what he was doing, but before I could open my mouth to say anything, his lips were on mine. Brandon kissed me firmly on the lips before quickly deepening the kiss by thrusting his tongue into my mouth. I moaned automatically into his kiss as his tongue entwined and danced around with mine. His arms around me tightened as he continued to kiss me in front of all the board members. This was not part of the plan. At all. With everyone's eyes on me, I was forced to go along with his public display of affection. I could hear surprised and shocked gasps from the audience and knew that they probably didn't need any more convincing than this. Perhaps we should have just made out in front of them since the beginning so that I could have saved my breath. I reached up a hand and placed it on the side of Brandon's face before I began kissing him back heatedly. The scene was probably too intense for some because some people started walking out in the middle of our performance. By the time that Brandon had decided that he's gotten his point across and broke our kiss, I was already out of breath. I watched in astonishment as he turned to smile confidently at the audience. I wanted to hit him, but that would have to wait. The meeting came to a sudden end after that, and we retreated to his personal office. I flopped down onto the sofa and heaved a loud sigh of relief. That performance took a toll on my stamina and my lifespan for sure. I wondered if I should revise the rate in the contract upwards if I had to go through something like that often while working for Brandon. Unlike me, Brandon seemed to be in a bright and cheerful mood as he sat down on the sofa opposite where I was sitting. He looked straight at me and smiled. I raised my eyebrows at him questioningly, but I didn't smile back. So, you're still in love with me even after all this time? He asked suddenly. As if. Haha. Of course. Not, I replied with an amused laugh. I should have known, he muttered before laughing along as well. An uncomfortable silence crept up between us when our laughter died down. It's true that I was always wishing for your success though. Even after you left, I said so softly that I wasn't sure if he could hear me. I wouldn't have minded if he didn't. After he left me, I was hurt and heartbroken. However, there was never a time when I didn't wish him all the best. I glanced up to see that Brandon was looking straight at me with a look that I couldn't quite read on his face. He must have heard me. I smiled a little and he got up from his seat and walked away towards the glass window. The city view beyond was breathtakingly beautiful, but I was sure that wasn't why he was hiding there by the window. I should get a golden Oscar trophy made for your outstanding performance just now. I'll make sure that it's made of real gold, and I'll encrust some parts of it with real diamonds as well. What do you think? Brandon suggested as he turned back to look at me. No need for that, but I don't mind if you want to chip in a couple millions of dollars as tip. I replied with an idea of my own. Come with me, Brandon said as he headed for the door. Where are we going? I asked curiously. Shopping, he replied. The workaholic Brandon is going to take me shopping in the middle of a workday. Huh? Don't you have to work? I asked, my eyes widened in shock. Of course, I do. I'm choosing to spend time with you instead of doing work. Shouldn't you feel appreciative? He said mockingly as he grabbed my hand and pulled me after him. BEDODMUMM.NO. I muttered my reply as he led me towards the elevator. Just come along. I promise I'll get you something that you like, he said confidently. I wondered if he even knows what I like after all this time. Are you trying to make me get diabetes? I asked sarcastically. Brandon turned to face me with an innocent and guiltless look on his face. What's wrong? You used to like buying this stuff all the time, he said casually. That was then, and this is now. I muttered darkly. I turned to look at the specialized sweet store filled with various types of colorful candies, chocolates, candy floss, lollipops, marshmallows, and everything else in that category. I wasn't certain, but I believe the last time I came to a place like this was with Brandon during my university years. After that, I started a new phase in life after marrying George, and stuffing myself with sugar wasn't an option anymore. When Brandon said that he would buy me something that I would like, did he mean this? To be continued. Chapter 67. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 67. What was mine, I wonder if it's still there. I mumbled to myself. There used to be a sweet shop a short walk from our university where Brandon and I would drop by often for me to restock my supply of sweet goodies. The old couple that ran that shop was a loving couple and they always gave me free extras. Brandon would tease me about getting fat or rotting my teeth out from eating too many candies. However, whenever I got depressed or we got into a fight, he would buy me candies from that store to cheer me up all the time. The store. It's not. Sadly, Brandon replied. Really? I exclaimed with disappointment as I turned to face him. Yeah, I checked, he replied with certainty. He checked. Did he go back there just to check on it? I looked at Brandon as he casually picked up a pink heart-shaped lollipop. Just like back then, the cute candy doesn't seem to fit his image when he held it in his hand. I was going to ask him why he went back to check, but I decided not to. That's too bad. Well, the old couple is probably enjoying their retirement right now, I said with a small smile. When I turned around, Brandon was gone. I spotted him paying at the cashier and walked to his side. Although I was tempted to buy so many things from the store, I held back because I knew that it was unhealthy, and I cannot afford to gain weight. My looks are part of my job, and that's that. What are you buying? I asked curiously as I tried to peek to see what he held in his hand from behind him. Instead of answering my question, Brandon turned to face me, and then I felt a taste of sweetness between my lips. Brandon smiled down at me as he gently pushed a lollipop into my mouth. I blinked rapidly in surprise as the cherry flavor of the lollipop filled my mouth. Gnav what? I began slurring. Don't speak with your mouth full. You sound so funny, Brandon warned as he laughed before walking past me. I hurried after him while sucking busily on the lollipop in my mouth. The sweet taste felt extremely pleasant on my tongue, and my body rejoiced at the extra sugar that it was receiving. It had been a long while since I walked around with a lollipop in my mouth like this. Are we done? I asked after taking the lollipop out of my mouth. I can't believe he took me all the way here to buy a single lollipop. If we're done for the day, I could use a good and relaxing rest in bed. Nope. Follow me, Brandon said as he waited for me to catch up to him. He grabbed my hand and held it firmly as he strode along the sidewalk. Since it was the middle of a weekday, there wasn't many people around. I walked by his side while very conscious of the fact that he was still holding my hand and that he had slowed his pace to match mine. Brandon didn't say anything, and I began to really wonder where he was taking me. That was a longer walk than I thought. Brandon complained a little. He opened a glass door for me and led me inside a boutique. I felt like I should be the one complaining because for the same distance that he covered, I walked it in heels. Tell me about it. I muttered underneath my breath. He grinned at me and pouted at him. Welcome. I've been expecting you. A young woman with dark hair and sparkling green eyes came to greet us. Thanks for putting them on hold, Brandon said. What on hold? The boutique, I realized, seemed to be selling a various mix of used luxury products. Everything from branded bags, accessories, furniture, and antiques. Honestly, I was curious about what Brandon wanted to buy for me here. If I had to bet, it'll probably be some rare antique furniture or art because I don't think Brandon would have difficulty buying me a brand-new branded handbag. Not that I wanted one. He urged me to follow the woman and I followed purely out of curiosity to see what he had apparently put on hold for me to see. The woman gracefully led us to the second floor of the store before showing us to a private room that was located at the back. When she opened the door and stepped to the side, Brandon urged me in by placing his hand at the small of my back and giving me a gentle push forward. Hesitantly, I walked into the room. Oh my! I whispered after I gasped with a mix of surprise and utter shock. The sight that greeted me was a sight that I was used to but had never dreamt of ever seeing again in this life. On the display shelves were the handbags from my personal collection that I had collected rigorously during my marriage to George. On the walls were rare paintings that were part of my personal collection. Everything that had been taken from me was now elegantly displayed right in front of my eyes. While I was still struggling to recover from my shock, I heard the sound of the door closing behind me and then I felt a firm touch on my shoulder and realized that Brandon had wrapped his arm around my shoulders. I think it's missing a few paintings because sadly they have already been auctioned off, but apart from that, it should all be here. Brandon said with a hint of regret in his voice. I had no idea why he was doing this for me or why he seemed so regretful after he's done so much. Reaching my hand out, I brushed my fingertips softly against the soft calf leather of a flamingo pink handbag. It's real that I can touch it. I turned around to face him and then I threw my arms around him and hugged him tightly to me. His warmth along with his scent enveloped me as I buried my face in his chest. Tears started to sting my eyes. It wasn't about getting these luxurious things back, but I just hated losing what was mine. To be continued. Chapter 68. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 68. A small miracle and more trouble. Thank you so much, Brandon. I would have liked to say that I didn't want it back, but I guess I do. I know I don't need these luxurious things after I lost them, but it still feels so good to see them all back together like this. I thanked him honestly. You always hated losing your things, right? Brandon whispered from above my head. His tone was so gentle that it brought tears to my eyes. This is bad, I'm going to start crying for real. Thank you. I whispered as I stared up into his gray eyes. Don't start crying. You're supposed to be over the moon happy about this and you better be. This all costed a small fortune, Brandon said in a mocking huff. I smiled knowingly at him. It was a small miracle that he managed to buy back everything for me. However, that didn't mean that I felt comfortable taking it back. You know, I'm just glad that the collection has been kept together. However, I don't think I can accept this gift after all, I said honestly. Who says I'm handing them over to you for free? Brandon said, and I could see the mischief in his eyes. Ha! I mumbled in surprise. I should have known this. Things are never easy with Brandon. You did pretty well today, so what about you get this bag back? Brandon suggested. He picked up the flamingo pink bag that I was just touching and held it in front of me. Now I was starting to see where this was going. I think I deserve more than just a bag for what I did today, I said sternly before I grabbed the pink bag from his hand. Insurance that in case he changes his mind about all this. Brandon laughed at me, but he did pick up another bag and handed it my way. This one was navy and I liked it very much. Happy? He asked after I had taken the bag from his hand. You know that you didn't have to kiss me like that in front of all those people. I started complaining. Brandon sighed loudly before grabbing a clutch bag off from the shelf and handing it my way. Is this all my kiss is worth? I whined before pouting at him. Good try, but this is all you're getting for today, Brandon said decisively. The next moment, he was already out the door. I looked around the room still in disbelief as I hugged the 3 bags to my chest. Wait for me, my dear babies, I'll be back for you all very very soon. The truth that I would never tell Brandon was that of all the things and people that I've lost in this life, I hated losing him the most. The second week working with Eros didn't get any easier for me. His schedule was just too packed with work, and we ended up traveling everywhere. From early in the morning, we traveled to an outdoor photo shoot location because the director demanded for photos of Eros in the natural light of the rising sun, and that meant that we had to get there before sunrise. If I had thought that we had gotten any closer from last week, I was totally wrong. Eros did not pay me any attention while he worked throughout the day. Thankfully, Mark was there to act out the role of Eros's main manager. Just like the week before, I tagged along and tried to make myself useful wherever I can by following Mark's instructions to the letter. After the photo shoot, Eros had an interview with a magazine and then a commercial recording for a sports drink. Lastly, he had a meeting back at the office, and that was where we were headed right now. Finally, we can head back to the agency. Just one more meeting. The director of your new movie is coming to meet you. Make sure to impress him. The casting isn't set in stone yet, so please don't give him a reason to change his mind, Mark warned sternly. Eros did not reply as he stared out of the car's window like he was bored out of his mind. Eros, are you even listening? Mark asked with an exasperated sigh. Yeah. Eros mumbled without turning his head around. This movie project is very important for your career growth. If you get casted as the male lead and the movie does well, you'll open up a whole new world, the manager said dreamily. Eros didn't say anything in response, just like I had expected. I couldn't tell what he was thinking at all, and I wondered how his manager could deal with him. I mean, it was like talking to a brick wall. The movie director met us in one of the meeting rooms on Eros's floor. The director came along with his assistant, who was a younger man. On our side, only Mark, Eros, and I were present. After introducing ourselves, the director got straight to the point. I would love to have Eros play the male lead part in my upcoming movie. The higher-ups have agreed to it as well. However, there's a slight issue, the director said before pausing in hesitation. I glanced over at Eros and saw that he was calm and composed. Mark was well composed as well, and he was the one who was doing most of the talking. It would be great if you can let us know more about the issue that you are referring to. Mark asked politely. As you already know, the genre for my new movie is romance. The Scarlet Bond of Fate is a story about lovers who are separated by their social standing. Their relationship started off as a forbidden romance between the male lead when he was still in university with the girl whose mother was employed in his household as their maid. They hid their relationship from everyone. However, the guy was forced to marry someone else. The girl ran away from that town. Years later they are reunited, and sparks fly between them again. It's a heavily romantic and dramatic story. The director paused after passionately sharing the details about his movie. To be continued. Chapter 69. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 69. His problem is now my problem. Yes, we have seen parts of the script before accepting the offer for Eros to star in the movie. Regarding the issue, Mark began inquiring once again about the issue mentioned. I was starting to see the issue that he wanted to discuss now, because if I remembered correctly, Eros's problem was. Honestly, we're not sure if Eros can adequately express deep love, desperate longing, and passion on screen. I know that Eros has been successful in many movies prior to this, but they were all action movies. The director raised his concern. What do I have to do to prove that I am capable of taking on the role? Eros asked. I was so shocked that he actually spoke that I almost gasped out loud. Eros sounded serious, and I could tell that he was determined to get casted in this movie no matter what. There's a new scene that the scriptwriter just adapted for me. Of course, it's a love scene. I'll pass the script on to you, and I want you to act it out for me. That's all, the director said simply. Sure. I think that's fair. I would like us to proceed with the work without any doubts or worries as well, Eros readily agreed. He sounded so confident that for a moment I believed that the whole Eros cannot act love scenes or knows nothing about love crap that his manager had spoken about was all bull. Well then, please contact me when you're ready for this mini audition, the director said, clearly pleased. After that, the director discussed his potential company star who would play the female lead and his future plans on production. Soon after, the conversation came to a close and we walked the director to the elevator. Thank you for coming all this way to meet us. I'll be sure to contact you soon regarding the date for our next meeting, Mark said before he shook the director's hand firmly. No problem. I hope things turn out well. I am looking forward for an opportunity to work with the famous Eros, the director said with a firm nod of his head. Why did you readily accept such a request without consulting me first? Mark asked as he rubbed his temples with his hand. Mark was clearly distressed by the outcome of the meeting, while Eros seemed unfazed and unaffected by it all. The three of us sat at the meeting table after returning back there. The director and his assistant had left for the day. Is it that bad? I asked in a small voice. It is. Mark thundered. It's not. Eros countered bluntly. Mark and Eros gave conflicting replies at the exact same time. Mark rolled his eyes and took in a deep breath while Eros still acted as if the whole ordeal didn't really concern him. You can't do it, can you? You can't act out a love scene. Yet you went ahead and accepted the director's proposal for you to act it out. Mark said in frustration. You're right, I probably can't do it right now. Not up to the standard that he's looking for anyways, Eros replied matter-of-factly. Then. What are you going to do? Make a fool out of yourself in front of him so that he can go look for another actor to fill the role instead of you. How am I going to explain this to the president? Mark complained, sounding hopeless. A week, Eros said. What? Mark asked in confusion. I said that I probably can't do it right now, but if I'm given a week, I'm sure that I can pull it off, Eros stated with certainty. How? Are you sure? It's so risky. The best way is for the president to talk to the producers directly. And then they'll cast you without you having to go through that mini audition or whatever. Mark said, sounding very desperate. Even if I got in that way, if I can't live up to the director's expectations, the shoot won't go well. The project is going to fail at a later date anyways, Eros argued, and I had to say that he was making a lot of sense. I hated to admit it, but I'm starting to take Eros's side in this conversation. He was right, if he can't do it now then it'll just cause a problem for everyone later on. We have to figure out whether he can do it or not before the casting is finalized and the shooting starts. Pray tell me. What are you going to do? We've made you take so many acting classes and it didn't get you very far on the romantic scenes. What can you do in a week's time? Mark challenged as he frowned at Eros. That's Elena's problem, Eros said as he pointed a finger in my direction. My problem? What? Sorry that I don't follow. I said in pure confusion. You're my contract girlfriend, right? Eros asked rhetorically. Well, yes, I replied hesitantly. Then teach me. Teach me how to love, Eros said before smiling his screen-perfect smile at me. I said hesitantly as my throat suddenly felt very dry. Are you scared? You can back out now if you want. Eros teased as his eyes challenged me. Eros's golden eyes held mine and I couldn't look away. It felt like the world had stopped spinning and time had stopped ticking. It felt like we were the only ones in the room. I knew with certainty that this challenge wouldn't lead to anything pretty. I knew that I was playing with a fire that was about to go out of control. I knew all that but still. Of course not. Let's do this, I said as I reached out a hand across the table towards him for a handshake. Eros smiled a very seductive smile at me before his hand reached out and took mine. With his eyes staring deeply into mine, instead of shaking my hand, he pulled my hands up to his lips and kissed the back of it tenderly. And this was the guy who couldn't act out a romantic scene. What a rotten joke. To be continued. Chapter 70. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 70 Heartbreaking love scene. Despite my brilliant display of courage in front of Eros, the issue of the script bothered me greatly. That night, I ate almost a pint of ice cream by myself as I sat on the floor of my room and leaned my back against my bed. I hated my stress-eating habits. Honestly, I've never succumbed to this before in years. It wasn't even this bad when George passed away. I stuffed another spoonful of ice cream into my mouth before sucking on the spoon, feeling the cold stainless against my tongue. That night I went to sleep with dreams of various scenes that might appear in the script that the director would mail over. I thought my imagination had run quite wild in my dreams as I dreamt up various classic romantic scenes from movies that I've seen before. However, I was about to find out that my imagination couldn't beat that of a professional scriptwriter. The next day was another day with Eros and his manager at the agency. Since I didn't sleep very well the night before, I had a slight headache early in the morning. The second day with Eros was as packed as the day before. However, Mark had cleared Eros' schedule so that we would get back to the office early in the evening. The reason for that was because Eros had to work on his acting practice. The script from the director has arrived and I've printed 2 copies for you too, Mark said sternly as he handed us our copies. Thank you, I thanked him with a small smile. Now that I held the script in my hand, I had very mixed feelings. I was anxious and strangely excited to finally know what the scene was about. However, I also dreaded the fact that I had to help Eros practice soon later today. There'll be some free time in our schedule and time in the car. You too should read up and familiarize yourself with the script to make the most of the practice later today. I also contacted a very talented acting coach help out as well, Mark explained. I glanced over at Eros and saw that he had already started flipping through the script. When it came to work, Eros was very focused, and he took everything seriously. I bit my lower lip as I started flipping through the script as well. The moment my eyes scanned through, I glanced over at Eros again and wondered how he could read it without showing any reaction. Did he expect the scene to be like this? My hands clenched around the script as my eyes focused on the words printed on the page. How am I supposed to act this out with anyone? Let alone with Eros. Eros and I sat side by side on the sofa while we waited for the acting coach to arrive. According to Mark, she was one of the best acting teachers in the industry and the agency has hired her specifically to help Eros get into this role. She's worked with him in the past when he first started acting, but those were for action movies. This would be the first time that Eros would seriously take on a romantic movie. Eros was silent and tense and I could tell that he didn't look forward to the session. He probably has his own reasons while I had my own sets of reasons as well. Although I've told myself countless times that this is all just a script, all acting and all make-believe, the contents of the script still bothered me immensely. Before my thoughts could darken any further, the teacher walked into the room with a pleasant smile on her lips. I could sense the positive energy that seemed to be emitted from her presence in the room. "Hello there. I heard you've got quite a challenge on your hands again, Eros. As always, I'll be happy to help you out, so don't you worry about a thing," the middle-aged woman said. She was quite plump with a very curvy figure and a very wide smile. Her hair was short but permed and she wore relaxing clothes as if she was about to head out for a night stroll. Eros did not offer any words of greeting as he just nodded at her. "Hi, I'm Elena, Eros's assistant manager. It's great to meet you and thank you for helping out Eros on his new project," I said as I stood up from my seat and offered her my hand for a shake. "Nice to meet you. I'm Doreen, an acting coach." Doreen introduced herself. She shook my hand with a warm smile before we both took our seats. She sat on the sofa opposite from where Eros and I were sitting, and then she took out the script and started flipping through it. "I heard that the director chose this scene for your special audition, is that right?" Doreen asked as eyes settled on Eros. "Yeah," he replied passively. "All right then. Let's start by going through the context of the scene. It's important to understand what led up to this scene. How the characters are probably feeling and all that before we start," Doreen said. I nodded, and it felt like despite my discomforts, I might be learning a couple of new and useful things today. Eros didn't say anything, and I wondered if he was even paying attention. This was part of his work, so I doubt that he wouldn't take it seriously. This scene takes place after the female lead, Naomi, goes home to find that her parents have hung themselves. She finds them both dead and is extremely shocked and saddened. She got scared and doesn't know what to do. She calls the male lead, Dylan, and meets up with him at his house. The scene is when they meet up and she tells him what happened, and he comforts her. She is scared to sleep alone, and they end up sleeping together. Doreen explained professionally. "So, what do we do now?" Eros asked emotionlessly. "To be continued.